Hi, I'm Lisa Fletcher, and you're in the stream. Today, will Venezuela's youth be a deciding factor in choosing their next president? And what does this mean for Hugo Chavez? We want your voice to be heard, and Malika Bilal is here looking out for your live feedback. Tweet her using the hashtag AJStream. Malika, Venezuela has a lot of issues it's grappling with. High inflation, unemployment, a struggling economy, violence, crime.
And some of those are really resonating with the youth community because it affects them to a greater extent. And that's what our community is talking about. So if you'd like to talk about that, join the conversation and tweet us using the hashtag AJStream. And
to Malika's right is Gregory Wilpert. He is the co-founder of Venezuela Analysis, an independent English language website focused on current affairs in the country. Gregory, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Here at the stream, we like to think of ourselves as an aggregator of online news. And one of the sites that we're using to share images is Pinterest. We've just started a pin board of photos and street art related to the Venezuelan elections. You can check it out at pinterest.com/AJStream.
Hi, I'm Leslie Hazelton. I'm a writer, I'm a blogger, and I'm in the stream.
How much of an impact will Venezuela's youth have in their country's upcoming election? Both President Hugo Chavez and his main opponent, Enrique Capriles, are intensifying their focus on the under 30 demographic, a group that makes up more than a third of the electorate. And creative efforts to reach out to young people are, without a doubt, making their campaigns the ones to watch. Recently, street graffiti has emerged with a much younger portrayal of the 58-year-old Chavez. The art shows him in various roles as sports star, rapper, and even a motorbike enthusiast. The battle for votes is also playing out in social media between the millions of Facebook and Twitter followers for the candidates. On Tuesday, a television appearance by Capriles on a popular nighttime talk show generated more than 100,000 mentions on Twitter and topped the trending topics list worldwide. So, will the youth vote be the deciding factor in this race? And what are young Venezuelans looking for in their next leader? Here to help us explore these issues facing young voters is Roderick Navarro. He's a student leader at the Central University of Venezuela and has led protests against the Chavez administration and its policies. He's joining us via Skype from Caracas. Roderick, welcome to the stream.
Hello, hi, thanks for the invitation.
Thanks for being here. Greg, I want to start with you. Both Hugo Chavez and Enrique Capriles are focusing on Venezuela's youth vote. Is the youth vote going to be the tipping point for this election?
I think it could very well be, certainly, because, as you mentioned in the introduction, it makes up over 30% of the electorate. And also, there's a very big demographic shift that took place in the last 14 years that Chavez has been in office. So, I mean, these are people who, by and large, were small children when Chavez was first elected. So that's the only president they've ever known. And so they don't have this reference that Chavez always refers to about the past and how much he's improved the country compared to, the pre-Chavez era. They don't have that comparison, and so they need to be convinced based on how they're doing now. This comparison to the past just doesn't work for them, and so that's a much bigger challenge for an incumbent than it is for a challenger to convince them. Well, you can always have it better. We're going to offer you more.
Would you say that at least in recent history in Venezuela, this is the most vocal and potentially influential group of young people in decades?
Well, that's hard to say because the youth in Venezuela has always been kind of rebellious, and especially there have been a number of movements, and my wife comes from the student movement, and in the 1980s, and so there have been vocal movements going on throughout the history of Venezuela. So I wouldn't necessarily highlight this one as being more important.
Not necessarily more important, but influential in terms of a presidential race.
Perhaps, yes, especially since Chavez represents the left in a way that no previous president represented the left in Venezuela, and so previously there were pure protest movements that never really had much of an impact, whereas now the whole political discourse has shifted towards the left, and so in that sense it can be more of a tipping point.
Roderick, I'm curious, what are people looking for? What are young people looking for in their next president?
Well, young people in Venezuela is looking for more security, is looking for a best education, not only the high school but the university, college education, more employment, more jobs for young people, And that's why are we supporting Enrique Capriles Rabanski, because Hugo Chavez in 14 years has just not given the enough resources to the universities to have a very good education, and doesn't have promote more jobs for young people, and that is it's a very bad problem for us, and that's why we are supporting Enrique Capriles.
Well, I think jobs and education, two things you mentioned, those are also resonating with our community. But Gregory, you mentioned something a little bit earlier, and you said that for a lot of young people, this is the only president they've ever known. Sylvia on Twitter says the youth will vote for Chavez because that's what they're accustomed to. Elections are just like here, she says, and she's tweeting from the US. Freedom message has to be clear. But on the other hand, we have a tweet from Alex who says the youth vote has gotten tired of the lies of the president and his government. The economy is getting worse. Now, as Roundup mentioned, education and jobs and the economy is a big issue. Is that something that you think will factor into this?
Well, of course, jobs is always an issue for the young people as they're entering the labor market, and so that's always definitely a concern. But on the other hand, if you look at this actual situation of the economy, it's not so bad. I mean, economic growth has been 5% so far this year. So that's pretty substantial, actually, for a country like Venezuela. And that's again one of these issues where the youth is perhaps affected differently than the rest of the population. And so I can understand that that would be a major concern. But seen in the larger scale of things, it's not how should I say the main factor really for the election as a whole.
I want to bring in another guest. Joining us from Caracas is Andres Azpurua. He is an activist who helps train young Venezuelans to use social media tools for civil society engagement. Right now his work focuses on promoting the youth vote. Andres, welcome to the stream.
Hi, I'm very happy to be here.
So you are creating this network of civil society organizations to monitor the campaigns and the elections, and they're comprised mostly of young people. Talk about this. Talk about what's going on.
Yes, of course. I mean, most young people are, really active around these elections. A lot of people are working in the campaigns of either side of this election, and many people are also working non-partisan initiatives like that we have. I mean, many people are very interested in having this election be as peaceful and as clean and transparent as it can be. So a lot of people is investing their time and effort into monitoring what's going on, into making sure that everything that's happening on the streets is reflected someplace so that appropriate action can be taken. It could be pointed to the authorities what's going on, and people are actually informed. What we are building is a network of initiatives and projects that monitor the election through citizen tools and social media, as well as traditional monitoring tools, and combining all those projects into a single site, in a single place where all of this information is viewable by everyone, and people can make their own decisions. Journalists can have a wider view of what's going on in the country, and we're also promoting participation.
All right. So, Greg, I'm just curious, in terms of some of the issues that are really dominating the discussions right now in Venezuela, economy, violence, crime, how do the candidates weigh in on this? How are they each doing in those areas?
Well, certainly I think the crime issue and the insecurity issue is really much bigger an issue for the youth than the economic issue is, and that's obviously because they have trouble going out at night because they're afraid they're going to be assaulted, and they have their precious hardware stolen, like the cell phones and things like that. Mm-hmm. So that's certainly a major issue, and it's of course the one that the opposition constantly, that is Capriles, constantly will mention in every single speech. And it's really an area where the government has seriously fallen behind in terms of addressing the issue. Now recently the government has introduced a new national police force, but it's in a situation of transition from the old police to the new police, and so that's created a lot of uncertainty and a lot of issues of its own, and it hasn't really taken hold yet, although those areas where the national police has entered and has been introduced, crime has dropped by something like 20%, which is pretty significant, but they haven't covered the whole country yet, and so the government is really behind on that issue.
Well, you mentioned crime, and that brings up a tweet here from Johnny, which I think is really relevant. He says, Capriles will be the next Venezuelan president because everyone here has a crime victim in the family. No one mourning will vote Chavez. Now, that leads to a video comment. Roderick, I'd like you to have a listen to this.
The influence of the Venezuelan youth vote will be big. I believed in Chavez before. Now I say he failed our trust. The system is under the edge. The youth vote get tired from the lies of the actual president and his government. Economy is getting worse. I think they will make a great impact choosing Capriles. It's seen in all the streets of Venezuela.
So that was Ali Amin from Venezuela, who asked us to blur his face to obscure his identity. But Roderick, I'm wondering, you're an opposition student leader. What is it, like in this video comment, what is it that Chavez hasn't done that you feel that Capriles could do?
Well, this is a demonstration of what is happening in Venezuela with young people. A lot of people believed in Chavez one time ago, but now that people is not believing anymore because the liar, the Chavez is now a liar. No, he's saying to the people that he is going to be better in the next government, but he has already 40 years in the government, so nobody believes that because he says in a meeting that it's more important for him, the government, that the problems of the people. Know that people doesn't have water in their houses, doesn't have light, doesn't have a job, that it doesn't matter for him that people is killed in the streets by the violence, that the only thing that matters for him is Chavez, and that is the call to his people to vote for him. And for young people that we, for example, when Chavez gets in the government, I was 11 years, and the most young people in the country has that age or less, and the only thing that we have only seen in our lives in democracy is just Chavez, and we believe that it's very important to have another president and with a new idea as Capriles is doing. And not only the bad situation about the economic, just the security too. We need more jobs for young people, freedom of speech, that it is very important for us, for all the Venezuelans, that the freedom of speech we can have it here. And with Chavez, we are not, these things are not going to be better.
Okay, Roderick, got it. And Roderick's painting a fairly bleak picture, Gregory, of the Chavez administration. But, the guy has built 26 hospitals. He's subsidized food in the barrios for the poor. He has subsidized oil so people have cheap gas. He is making cash payment to pensioners, to poor families with kids. Are those bad things?
No, I mean, there have been tremendous amounts of changes in Venezuela since Chavez took office. And I mean, one of the things that also get mentioned every once in a while is education. I mean, the number of university students has more than doubled since Chavez has come into office. And there's been tremendous amount of spending on public schools as well, increase. I mean, the amount of social spending in Venezuela has basically tripled as a percentage of GDP. I mean, it's just enormous amounts of money been going into these kind of projects. Now, I think one of the areas where one can certainly say there might be an issue and complain is that many of the programs haven't been as efficient as they should be and have maybe been here and there plagued with corruption. But again, this is it's something that you can't, that I think the youth has a hard time appreciating this because of they don't have that comparison to the previous era. So that's of course the main challenge that Chavez faces is to counteract that.
And speaking of counteracting that, I'd like to read this Facebook comment from Daniel, who says, the youth vote is crucial in the Venezuelan elections. The last census said the average age in Venezuela is 26, and the use of social media resources like Facebook and Twitter changed the way to look for votes for the candidates. Now, Andres, I'd like you to consider that, but also have a listen to this video comment and let me know what you think.
Hi, this is Matias Bianchi, Director of Asunto del Sur. The political landscape is so polarized in Venezuela today that it's very difficult to rely on polls and surveys. Therefore, it's difficult to know how young people will actually vote. As poor tend to vote for Chavez and the upper middle class and wealthy for Capriles, it is obvious why we see a higher pro-Capriles activism in the social media. My opinion, this has been a great contribution to the rise of Capriles and the stagnation of Chavez. Still, this Sunday, this will not be enough.
So basically, he mentions that social media isn't representative of the entire population.
Well, it's true that you can't say that social media, everyone is, I mean, the Venezuelan population is equally represented in social media. You could also argue that the population is not represented in the airwaves or in the newspapers in the same exact way either. So, and I do think that the social media has changed how politicians look for votes. I mean, politicians often measure themselves in how many Twitter followers they have instead of how well they did the last election. So social media has changed a lot in politics in Venezuela. It's also been an escape valve for many people who didn't find a way to express their lack of support to either opposition or pro-Chavez politicians or candidates. And it is a very important medium of communication. Many news are broken on Twitter or Facebook, both by government officials and reporters alike. So it is a key factor in how Venezuelans communicate and a key piece of the Venezuelan political discourse.
I would agree with that, but also mention that Chavez himself has about 3 times as many Twitter followers as Capriles does. So if that's a way to reach the youth, it looks like Chavez has a big advantage there in that area at least.
And speaking of that, Roderick, the other advantage that Chavez has is he can be on TV as much as he wants. He can essentially commandeer the television stations and broadcast his speeches for as long as he likes. His opponent, Capriles, gets 3 minutes per day. How important of a tool is social media for you and the other activists for Capriles, and do you think it's enough to get close to leveling the playing field?
Well, social media is very important for us because President Chavez has been transmitting campaign messages over all TV channels, and our commitment is to give away or spread out the message of freedom without the illegal usage of state resources. Then we do that using social media as our most powerful tool. And Chavez has all the public resources to spread his message to all the country. And that's why he's not going to streets and doing campaigning in the towns. He just only has the public resources, the propaganda, and the media all the time, all day or night, and that's the campaign for him. And one of the most important things that I want to say about education, that Chavism says that they have invested a lot in education, but what they doesn't say to you is that they expropriating another university's structures, infrastructure, to change the name and say that they have created new universities. And that is a very important fighting that we have in our country, where the Chavez government expropriate universities to change the name and say that they are creating new universities. And this is very critical for us. And in the states of our country, like the Guárico or Cojedes and Apure, Barinas, UNES University is there, they want to expropriate that, to change the name and say that they are creating new universities.
Okay.
And that problem, we diffuse it, we spread that problem, for example, in the social media, because the government have the control of all the media in our country.
Right. Andres, I know you wanted to jump in on this.
Yeah, so what I want to say is basically that people are using a lot of social media because they feel they don't have access to traditional media. Even if they're opposition or leaning TV stations, there are plenty of state-owned TV stations, but people often feel that they have no access to it, or people feel that the info that they get from those sources, both on either side of this problem, don't really show whatever they need, and people really use a lot of Twitter to inform themselves and to educate their own political views. So people make decisions, political decisions, on what they see the candidates do or their followers do online. It could be bad. It could be bad for them. It could be good for the politicians. I mean, people hack Twitter accounts just to retaliate for whatever people may or may not say. So that, I mean, really, the social media is just one of the most important places where the political discourse is happening in Venezuela.
Gregory, a lot of the young people are still undecided. Why are there so many undecided voters this late in the game, do you think?
That's a very good question, and a lot of pollsters have really puzzled that, because it's a very difficult, and I'm not sure if I really have the answer to that. But I do think one of the reasons is that there's a lot of people who used to be Chavez supporters who've now kind of become undecided because they feel like a lot of the problems that Chavez promised to resolve haven't been resolved, but they don't want to side with the opposition. And one indicator for that is that if you ask in terms of party affiliation, or even if they identify themselves as Chavista or opposition, the percentage that identifies as Chavista is always way larger than, I mean, we're talking almost twice as large as the one that identifies with the opposition, and the rest is basically undecided. But when you ask them how they vote, they oftentimes become even more undecided. So that's the thing. They identify with the program, but have become more hesitant, I think, because of some of the outstanding issues that Chavez has promised to resolve. I just want to respond, though, quickly.
I'm going to let you do that in the post-show.
Okay.
We're just about out of time in the main show, so hold that thought, and we're going to have all of our guests back and pick up on this discussion at stream.aljazeera.com. But first, we want to go to Malika, who's got a few other story leads that we're following.
Doctors in Kenya have taken to the web to rally others in a fight over better pay and health facilities. Using the hashtag Peramende, the Kiswahili word for candy, medics and their supporters are tweeting their demands after talks with government officials failed to end a nearly month-long strike. Mr. Mwangi on Twitter explains the origin of the hashtag, which erupted when a politician likened striking doctors to sulking children demanding candy. Well, the doctors weren't amused and began circulating images and graphics to describe their working conditions. A newborn baby is welcomed into this bed, and it doesn't bother your conscience, asks Alan. This best defines our healthcare system. No ambulances to the poor, tweets Dr. Atandi, showing a picture of a woman being pushed in a wheelbarrow. He continues with a personal story of having to turn away a begging mother and her wailing baby at the pharmacy because you lack the antibiotic. Our next lead looks at a spoof video that combines the mega popularity of the Korean song Gangnam Style with U.S. politics. Have a look.
Us consumption. I got distinguished hair and a private jet that flies me way up in the air. Buy and sell your company with so much savoir-faire. I bought a mansion for each one of my 24 heirs. Straight up millionaire. Affluence.
Style video got more than 25,000 likes in under 8 hours, and that number is still climbing. The video mocks the wealth of the Republican presidential candidate, but some netizens took issue with that. I think it's pretty funny, putting aside that all that money they talk about is hard-earned from Mitt Romney's life, Derek writes on Facebook. Chad offers some perspective. Let's keep in mind that Obama has an obscene amount of cash, too. Romney has the most of the two, but both fall into the upper 1% of our society's wealth holders. The online conversation around the video coincides with the first debate of the U.S. presidential campaign season. For more coverage of the campaign, head to aljazeera.com, where you'll find the U.S. 2012 Spotlight page, with an up-to-the-minute live blog, videos, and interactive graphics. And as always, we want to know what you have to say, so tweet us with the hashtag AJStream. Lisa?
Well, if you're not already watching us online, head over to stream.aljazeera.com to join us for our post-show discussion. And on Thursday, 1 out of every 5 young Europeans is looking for a job. Will they become the lost generation? We'll talk about youth unemployment in the EU. Until then, we'll see you online. Welcome back. You're in the Stream's online post show, and we're discussing the Venezuelan elections and how the youth vote could decide who will become the next president. I want to get back to our conversation with Gregory Wilpert. We were talking about an enormous amount of media access that President Chavez has in Venezuela, and you wanted to comment on that.
Well, I think sometimes it's exaggerated, because it's true that he can have access to the media whenever he wants through either these basically requiring all the television stations to broadcast an official message, and of course there's a number of state media that broadcast his campaign events and so on. However, the opposition also has access to the media and to the mass media, such as television and the radio, through the private television stations, and it's people always say, oh, but the state has so many more channels. It doesn't have that many more channels, first of all, and secondly, even though they have a national reach, these channels, they are only watched by a small percentage of the population. According to most surveys, it's only about 15% of the population, whereas the vast majority, over 60%, watch private stations, which overwhelmingly, or for the most part, broadcast more an opposition point of view. The other thing is that there's also a lot of community media nowadays, and so that complements, I think, the social media that the other guest was talking about, that they have, people have access to that, which has proliferated tremendously. There's over, I think it's over 600 community radio stations now in Venezuela, and something like 60 community television stations. So it's been a tremendous boom in that area, and that gives ordinary citizens a lot of access to the media.
Andres, what kind of traction is this graffiti campaign getting? We talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the show, this campaign that is putting Chavez in this light as a hip-hop artist and a motorbike guy, and basically trying to make him look pretty cool.
Well, I've seen the viral images going around. I've seen also people mocking that campaign. Certainly, viral messages are really important right now. I mean, especially with non-partisan activities and youth movements. For example, Voto Joven, which is part of our network, they have made viral videos before, and they're making new viral videos that, I mean, have thousands and hundreds of thousands of views. For example, our online tool, comovotar.com, which teaches people interactively how to vote, and it's really simulating every step of the process, including how to vote in the machine. As guys right now should have.
Here, hang on. I've got a video of that actually. Let's keep talking, and if we want to take a shot of this video that shows people, this is actually really cool. It shows. There we go.
Showing it?
Yeah, we're on it. So it's basically showing people exactly what you're saying, how to vote.
Yeah, exactly. Especially the part where there's an electronic place where you can press in the faces of the different candidates and show up on the screen. I mean, we send people with the script actually to test every single possibility of the machine so that the simulation is accurate. So you can change your candidate, you can vote kneel, you can waste the opportunity to vote within 6 minutes and everything. So and hundreds of thousands of people are watching it, and all of the traffic is viral. We have had news articles about this, but all of the traffic clearly comes from Twitter, Facebook, and email, people sharing this link.
This is actually a really amazing tool. Gregory, have you had a chance to see this?
No, I haven't seen that video, but YouTube has become tremendously popular for these kinds of things.
Yes.
Greg, we were talking about how to vote, but there's a sentiment among our community members that this may not be free and fair. Ernesto says, in Venezuela, the youth vote is 90% against the regime, he says, but the whole process is staged, rigged, and hacked. Is that sentiment prevalent?
No, I think if you look at, again, I'm referring to polls that show very clearly that the National Electoral Council has one of the highest levels of respect in Venezuela. Over 70% of the population, which is higher than just about any other institution in Venezuela, trusts the Electoral Council. And also, if you look at the polls about the actual youth vote, it's more. Chavez has a slight lead over Capriles. So to say it's 90% is, I don't know where they get that number from.
Well, things can be blown up on social media, and without the traditional media, sometimes that can go unnoticed.
Yes.
Andreas, you had a comment?
I would like to add in a lot of people are not sure about this election. A lot of people were afraid of the changes to the election system with a fingerprint reader added to the mix. So that's one of the reasons we had to make this website I just spoke to you about. And for the people who are worried about the elections, or will probably see, because this always happens, things going wrong in the election, like people trying to do propaganda stuff inside of the election booth, stuff like that. People should report that, and to report that, they should go either one of the organizations in the Elección Ciudadana network, or go to eleccionciudadana.com, and they can report everything they see. We also have SMS for people who don't have internet access, or have a Twitter hashtag too, for reporting anything they see wrong in the election. And people, good news too, if you see a very high turnout in a voting pool, you can go and report that too.
There have been some concerns, Gregory, about post-election violence with this election. How do you weigh in on that?
I mean, that's always been a concern. I mean, every election that comes up as an issue, and so far it actually never turned out to be an issue, so I'm not that concerned about it. Because, like I said, the Electoral Council has a lot of respect, and so no matter what the result is that they announce, I think most people will believe that that is the result, and therefore there's not going to be any real reason to go out and protest, because any claims for that there was fraud will be basically ignored by the vast majority of the population and will have no credibility, I think. So that's why I don't really expect much violence, although of course also even on the pro-Chavez side they're saying that the opposition will become violent, which is also a very common claim, but I don't really foresee that.
Andres, what about you? Are you afraid of any post-election violence?
Well, I'm confident that a clean election will result in no kind of violence or anything like that. I mean, there's small chance of individual people taking, like, if somebody's having a party because they weren't some other people, that they might be, I mean, very mad about the result of the election, and you might see a lot of some people with a lot more fights, stuff like that. I really hope that doesn't go over the line. That's what I really don't expect any kind of violence or something major. Actually, it all goes into the responsibility of political leaders. It all depends on how they act after the election results are given, both opposition and government. Depends on the results and what they say.
Roderick,
what people will read.
I'm sorry, Roderick, a lot of the young people in poor areas support Chavez because he's nationalized industry and oil, and there are a lot of subsidies that they feel and opportunities that they feel wouldn't be available to them outside of the Chavez regime. Are they being misled, or is that a pretty fair statement? Is that a truth?
Excuse me, the last part I didn't hear it.
Do you feel that these young people in the poor areas who believe that their opportunities come through Chavez are being misled, or is that a fair statement? Is that true?
Well, Chavez has internationalized the oil industry, but to other governments that are not too friendly with democracy, for example, Iran, for example, Belarus. Chavez is a very good friend, was a very good friend from Gaddafi, and that is not very healthy for democracy in no part of the world, you know. And young people know that, you know, and that's in Venezuela. When we have bad hospitals, when we have bad education, when we have insecurity at the streets, and we ask, well, Chavez is more interested to give oil for free to other countries, and invest, I don't know how to say it in English, that to give that money to our country to resolve problems, you know. And young people is very critic about it, and that's why we are not supporting that politics of Chavez.
Okay, Greg, we got about 30 seconds left. Do you want to look into your crystal ball and wrap this up for us?
Well, I think the youth will generally vote for Chavez, and the main reason is that he has, like you said, given a lot of them a lot of opportunities. I mean, the new social programs for educational opportunities, access to universities, that's something that they never had before, especially in the barrios, and that's really revolutionary for them.
All right, Gregory Wilpert, Robert Navarro, and Andres Azpurua, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to our online community for your participation. We'll see you tomorrow.